everybody, and welcome to this exclusive conversation with VR expert, founder and CEO of BadVR, Suzy Borders. My name is Ursula Debres, and I'm the Global Director of Customer Growth for Meta Reality Labs team. And I'll be putting the big questions to Suzy in just a moment. But before I begin, I just want to take a couple of moments to talk about why we're here. In the last 18 months, there's been a lot of hype about the metaverse, and especially what it may mean for the future of work. But all this talk about the future misses one important fact, because there's already a technology that is changing the way businesses work today, and that technology is virtual reality. Virtual reality is having a huge impact on the way companies can get insights from their data and use it to become even more effective. Suzy is a perfect person to tell us more about this, so let's get into it. Suzy, thank you for joining us. I know we talked earlier just to get preparation for this interview, and I love your personal story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into VR?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm Suzanne Borders. I'm the CEO and co-founder of BadVR. So a little bit about my journey into VR. I started off as a punk rock kid growing up. I was really into alternative music. I was really involved in the music scene in Kansas City, where I spent the second half of my childhood and where I went to school. So I began building websites for local bands, building up first their MySpace pages, and then, as anyone who used MySpace knows, you sort of learn how to do HTML coding, did all of that. So I got really into that mixture of like artistic sort of music and graphic design and technology. I brought it together, got into doing UX design, got into doing product design, started working at startups based in the Los Angeles area after I had moved back there. So around 2014, I knew my co-founder, Jad, and he invited me to his house, and he said, you know what, I have some really cool technology. I have a DK1 Oculus kit that has a VR headset. And I was a little skeptical at first. I'm like, that sounds a little gimmicky. That sounds like Lawnmower Man. That sounds kind of like, Hollywood, whatever. But I'll come by, I'll check it out, because he always has the cool toys. So I sat down in front of a computer, put on a headset, and I was prepared to not be impressed, but he put me into a VR roller coaster ride. And I actually began to feel seated in a chair in front of a computer, not moving. I could feel like I was moving. I could feel the G-forces. Really, truly, my mind was so convinced in VR that I was moving that it manifested in my body, and I had the physical sensation of moving. So that was just pure magic for me, and really made me interested, or sparked my interest in VR technology. And ever since then, I've been exploring it, I've been learning about it, and eventually founded a company called BadVR in 2018.
I love it.
Thank you. That was focused on using VR to visualize data and to democratize the ability to find insight within data.
Yeah. So tell us about BadVR, what it stands for, the products that you bring in, and the solutions that you're looking to bring to businesses to help them.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, founded the company in 2018. So I can't believe that's been like 5 years ago.
5 years, yes.
That's crazy. But yeah, we've been around for 5 years now. Founded in Los Angeles. We're about 20 people. The name actually stands for Bring All Your Data to VR. It's an acronym. We're also badass. In addition to that, but
that's what I thought. It stands for Badass VR. Is like, yes.
Primarily stands for the acronym, Bringing All Your Data.
Bringing all your data, exactly.
Yeah, we're focused on really how do you take millions of individual data points and boil them down to one single decision. How do people do that, and how can we make that process much more effective and much more accessible? Very importantly, much more accessible to everyone. And as you can probably guess, what we believe is that using VR and AR technology to do this really makes that process a lot better. It opens up accessibility to people who would otherwise not really be able to be involved in that process, and really just removes any sort of blockages or bandwidth issues that we currently have when it comes to taking data and getting it into our minds. Really increases that amount. And so, we're focused on democratizing insight. We're very proudly Los Angeles company, and we're really excited to be here. We have 2 products. We have a product called AROC, which is also an acronym.
I love it.
It stands for Augmented Reality Operations Center. And it's like an immersive workplace environment where you can bring in all sorts of different types of data sets. You have different modules to display the data in different ways, and you can collaborate remotely or in real life with people within this environment, annotate things, collaborate, filter the data, all of these sorts of things. And then we have a product called C-Signal, which both of these have the same underlying technology, but different manifestations of it. C-Signal is more focused on augmented reality or mixed reality, where you can put on a headset and have X-ray vision into your wireless signals, so your RF spectrum.
Oh, interesting.
So, you can see your Wi-Fi network, your cellular network, your Bluetooth network, all in one view in real time, and respond and act accordingly. So
that's amazing. I remember years ago, I was working with a very large restaurant chain company, and they had a data center. Like, it's a center hub where they would look at all of their social media, statistics, data from their marketing campaigns, and they had a physical, they called it a war room of data. So when you talked about your first product, immediately brought to mind that place, because they had so many different screens that they were able to monitor globally what was happening across all the restaurants. They could track their branding, and what you're doing with this product is bringing it all into a virtual space. Much more cost effective.
Much more cost effective.
Where you can bring other people on board. I love that. I really connected personally with that.
Awesome.
And I would love for you, as I was connecting with that as a personal experience, tell us about some of the customer stories in which they've been able to leverage your products and get some incredible results. Because I know in talking to you, some of the stories were quite mind-blowing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the example for AROC, which is our Augmented Reality Operations Center. Like you were saying, the sort of virtualized ops center, instead of having all the screens, just sort of this immersive workplace where you can bring data sets in. So we were working with a large packaged goods customer, and they had started a new campaign, a new digital marketing campaign in response to some behavior changes that they were seeing across certain sectors. The problem that was resulting is that there was a ton of data, and their marketing team, the products that they were using, the 2D products they were using, their marketing team, they were having a really hard time finding insights within a certain time period. So it would take them a really, really long time to sort of sift through all this data, ingest it, understand it, and then take action on it. So their goal in reaching out to contact us, well, how can we sort of make this whole process move a lot faster? How can we remove these sort of obstacles in the course of ingesting the data, analyzing the data, and then finding the insights and operationalizing them? So we were able to come in with this product, AROC, and map out 16 plus dimensions of data, all within one easy to understand, intuitive workplace that all sorts of people, especially you have a large marketing team, a lot of them are not data analysts, many of them very talented but not specially trained in that. But with our technology, we were able to involve them in that process of discovery. And overall, the resulting ROIs were, we had one that was called the time to insight, which was essentially from the moment the data is collected to when you're actually able to discover something that's meaningful and valuable to you and actionable. So that went from like 1 to 2 days to like a couple hours. So that was a very important metric for us. The other one was using the data that they were able to ingest within this tool, this AROC tool. We had a 36% higher success rate with any sort of digital marketing campaign initiations or changes that resulted from using that technology. So it was really powerful to see all of these different results, and also really powerful just to see the ability to bring together all of these different data sets into one place, because that was something too. They were so used to checking, like, oh, we're going to go and check this interface and go check this interface and then go check this screen, and everybody was just so used to having to cobble things together. To see it all just sort of happen in one place.
Yeah.
I mean, the results really just speak for themselves in terms of the benefit and the value of that as well.
I love it. And
Yeah.
I think there's even additional unforeseen benefits of making the marketing team really feel empowered, because
Yes.
they're now
And involved.
Yes,
Yes.
they can interpret the data much easier. They don't feel intimidated
Yes.
by the different tools that before limited only people with the expertise would have the ability to interpret.
Yes.
And they can create context. They can add context and probably, like you
Yes.
said, make those decisions a lot faster.
Yeah, they were also engaging more with it, because, you know, there was a lot of conversation around, you know, we'd love to make data-driven decisions, but the problem is we don't receive the data, or we're not able to get the insights from the data until it's time way past the window of which we would need to make these data-driven decisions.
Right.
So we're always just waiting. The data arrives too late. You know, we're told that we're supposed to make these data-driven decisions. We understand the value and believe in it, but we're not empowered with the tools that we need to really make that happen in a timely manner.
Right.
So it was really cool to see that, and then also to see people really engage with that were not data people. Like, oh, I would love to use this. Is so cool that I can actually use this in my day-to-day, workflows. Yeah, it was really cool to see that, and really cool to see how much they really engaged with stuff, like dashboards that they were not using or that they didn't understand, but with this tool, really excited and really invested in it. So that's cool.
And what about your other product, where you can really see all your Wi-Fi and your Bluetooth?
Yeah, so that product is C-Signal. It's the
C-Signal.
RF spectrum visualizer. So with that product, we've worked with several telecoms. One of them, actually, the store is a really good example. So they were doing a Wi-Fi installation. There was a large residential building with different units in it. It was an older building that they had remodeled. So every one of the units inside the building was slightly different. And they were trying to optimize these Wi-Fi networks for each one of the tenants. And they had done the best that they could, but were having a lot of service calls from that building and a lot of technicians sending out to that building constantly, because they were having all of these Wi-Fi coverage and strength issues and performance issues. So they did a pilot where they, for that particular building, gave some of the service technicians the C-Signal application. So when they went out to actually go and fix these Wi-Fi networks and fix the coverage, they were able to do so with C-Signal. And part of that process really, it speeds up the whole overall engagement or the service time that they're on site. And then it also helps tell them where to place the router, which to optimize things. And then lastly, which is something that we didn't anticipate, is they started using it as a tool to better communicate with the customer on site for like what they were doing. So instead of just showing up with like a dude in a hard hat, just sort of like doing stuff in your house without really understanding what exactly they are doing or what the end result is, it ended up being a really powerful communication tool for them to show, hey, before this is what's going on, here's the issue, I'm going to do exactly this. And then at the end, give them this beautiful visualization of their Wi-Fi network in their home with a positive coverage. Everything's all evened out.
That is a great story. And I know many people in the audience can really connect to the need to have something like that. But tell me a little bit about the impact. What was that pilot's impact, return on the investment for that business?
Yeah. So there was an 81% decrease in return calls or repeat service visits.
Right.
So it was obviously the problem that sort of initiated it. So to see it decrease with that much percentage was just completely tremendous. And then the other percentage was a 28% increase in customer satisfaction from that element of communication. So that was really something that they took to heart with the customer satisfaction surveys and follow-up and all of that sort of stuff. But there was a large indication that people felt so much more invested and engaged in the process of fixing it, and really felt like it was fixed, and felt that that whole process of doing it was much more easy for them to understand, and wasn't this sort of like murky, well, I don't really know what's going on, I don't know if it's fixed, I have no idea. So that was a really, like I said, unexpected positive outcome
of that
for this pilot. Yeah, for
That's
sure.
amazing, because oftentimes when you're trying to understand signal that you can't see,
Yes.
When you're visualizing it, then you are better informed in terms of placement of the router.
Yes.
And just the fact that the technician is able to explain the process makes the person that is getting serviced a lot more at ease about the capabilities of the service provider, right?
Yes.
And the knowledge. So.
And there's also sometimes the question of like, okay, well, you said it was fixed, but I'm still having problems with it. But to have both of them be able to see, like, hey, here's all of the green light, which is in the application, the indicator that it's strong, good signal, to be able to have the service technician and the customer both see that together, you get a lot more understanding and buy-in from both sides, and you have a customer that's a lot more satisfied and a lot less likely to call back and say, hey, there are still issues. I'm still having problems here, there, or the other place. Yeah.
I love that.
So,
that's a substantial impact.
Yes.
I want to go back a little bit on the previous example with AROC when you talked about the 35% impact. Could you elaborate a little bit more in terms of what that meant for the business? What are you referring to? Just for those folks that missed that piece of the story.
Yeah, so they were using the data within the experience, is digital marketing campaign data. They were using this to make decisions about either changing their current campaigns or initiating new types of campaigns, either to a new target, a new demographic, or to a new geographic area. Or it had something to do with changing, some of the language or some attribute of that digital campaign. So if the decision was made with data that was
cobbled together, I said.
Yes.
As it usually
is.
If
the decision was made from data within the immersive experience and using the AROC tool, it had a 36% better outcome. So it was more successful, or tended to be more successful, when it was made with data that was either analyzed or seen or experienced within that immersive environment. It's kind of hard to explain.
Because I would imagine, it's about alignment in the decisions. And sometimes when the data is cobbled together from different sources, then there is not the same alignment in terms of trusting the data or maybe accessing the data interpretation. But bringing the data into one operation center where everybody could join in and be at the same plane of discussion, then it allows faster alignment and better communication on what the data means. So I do. That's interesting.
If you see the same thing, you tend to come to the same conclusion. So if you contrast that with, using multiple different 2D solutions, people are sort of engaging with the 2D solution that works for them, but that's different from person to person. So they're not all seeing the same thing. They're ingesting pieces of it, and then whatever works for them, coming to their conclusion and then sharing with someone else. But there was a difficulty as well, as there often is, coming to a consensus about, well, what is it that we're actually doing? What is the decision that we're making based upon this data? Because one person is seeing this perspective, another person seeing that perspective, but within the immersive environment, you're bringing everyone together. They're all seeing exactly the same thing. So the process of coming to a decision or consensus for a decision becomes so much faster and so much easier, just simply from the very nature of everyone just seeing the same thing. And I think the efficacy of those decisions also reflects that. Not only are they faster, but they're more efficient, and they're more efficient because everybody's engaging equally with the same material. Yeah, I think that's an important
really
part of it.
Powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. We need that for every part of our business.
That would be tremendously awesome.
I love it. I would love to pivot. I know we're coming to the tail end of our interview, and you've had such an incredible journey in this space, but also just in trying to solve problems that are really relatable to all of us who are either starting a business, running a large business, or a small business. What are some of the 5 key insights that you would like to share with some of the business leaders who are listening to us today?
Yeah, it's absolutely great question. I think one of the most important things is that when people think about VR technology, they really focus a lot on the hardware solution, right? So they focus about how much it costs or what the tech specs are, all of that. But I really fundamentally believe that it's not about the hardware, it's about the problem that the hardware solves for the user.
Right.
That is very, very important. And that being said, not every problem benefits from VR. There are certain problems that really, really, really are revolutionized by the addition of this technology. But just as, not everything is a nail, not every problem has VR as a solution. So you really need to focus on finding workflows that have a strong value add from VR, and don't just add it because it's cool. Because it's definitely cool.
Yeah.
But to get buy-in and to really utilize it to its fullest potential, it's important to identify what things have value add with VR and what workflows don't. For a third point, I think I touched on this a little earlier, but UX design or user experience design for VR is still in its early infancy.
Right.
It is a brand new way of designing. And a lot of the times, at least from the applications or my experience out there, I see a lot of designs that really would work well in 2D, but as the designers are sort of getting their feet wet in this new medium, it doesn't really translate. And unfortunately, the stakes are really high. If you have bad UX design in VR, people can get physically sick. So it's really important that as a business leader, when you're looking at VR and how to apply VR to your organization, that you're very thoughtful about finding products that have great interface design. Because another part of it is too, if somebody has a negative experience in their first time using VR, it turns them off so much towards it. So just be really thoughtful about the products that you engage with, and make sure that those products are designed in such a way that it's very easy for people to use and a positive experience for them.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you bringing up the importance of not cutting corners, especially in UX design, because it may have a physical reaction. That is such a good point that not often we consider. What would be your fourth insight?
Yeah, my fourth insight actually is counterintuitive to a lot of people, but I fully believe that it's not always about session length when you're measuring success of a user during an app experience. It's about really the quality of the problem that you're solving for them. So in some situations, if they're in the headset for a short period of time, but they're really solving a problem and saving a lot of resources, that's ultimately what matters. A lot of people really, though, sort of tend to look towards session length as a metric for saying, well, how long are they in the headsets every day? And if they're in the headsets every day, then that means it's successful, and if not, it's not. But really, like I said, I like to focus on what problem are we solving and how effectively are we solving the problem, and how many resources are saved, how are we benefiting from a holistic level. So that's my point number 4. It's not always about session length. My last point is that VR is a very powerful technology. It really can fundamentally change the way that we see reality, the way that we experience reality, right? It also can, when you have and form memories in VR, they are encoded in your brain the same way as the memories that you create and experience when you're in real life. There's no measurable difference between the two of them. When it comes to ingesting data, it's a very, very powerful tool that can help you ingest several orders of magnitude more data than you can on a 2-dimensional screen. So knowing all of that and knowing how powerful VR is, I'm going to revert back to the old adage, with great power comes great responsibility. So I think it's really, really important to keep that in mind when you're thinking about implementing VR solutions, and make sure that you harness that power for good and for the good of us all, including everybody in that vision of making sure that VR is used in that capacity.
I love
So that's my point number 5.
That's amazing. I want to refer back to your first point where you said that, and I really, really align with find the problem that you're trying to solve versus starting with the where can I fit VR. But oftentimes, folks, I don't believe, understand what they can do with VR. Many, many business leaders may still think of VR as gaming-focused experience, right?
Definitely.
So part of these sessions is to really highlight what would you recommend in terms of the path that they can do to uncover if VR indeed is something that they can use to solve the problem that they're having.
Yeah, that's a great question. When you're sort of looking at, okay, well, what sort of problem set can I hone in on and focus on and use VR as a tool to solve? Anything that involves a spatial element. For example, like if you're training people on how to put together an engine, you are using space to teach them this part goes here, this part goes here, and assemble this item. It is a spatial item. So stuff like that, whether that's for workplace training or whether that's for education, always there's an added value when you're doing that in VR. Because you can save resources. You don't need to transport people to a place where they can all physically see this item and then take it apart and put it back together again. And once you start scaling up engines to say like a fighter pilot, you know, or a fighter jet or whatever, you're talking about millions and millions of dollars that you have to use to replicate that experience. If you can do that digitally, then obviously there's an immediate value add, immediate saving of resources. So problems like that. And then also when you're thinking about what can benefit from VR, things that are inherently multidimensional problems. So with data, for example, certain types of data, like for example, geographic data, exists in three-dimensional space. So that was sort of the initial, or the nexus or the root idea behind BadVR is this is a three-dimensional data set. I have a bunch of data about properties and homes on the planet, and I would like to look at this data in 3D because it exists in 3D. Another example of this is like weather data. It is in the three-dimensional world. Let's look at it three-dimensionally. So anything where you're sort of compromising and slicing pieces into smaller pieces so that you can, you know, sort of better visualize it on a 2D screen, you can all stitch those things together and look at it in 3D. So I'd say the second part to that question is, you know, if it is something that exists in a three-dimensional format that you've had to previously disassemble so that you can better engage or interact with it, that could also benefit from VR as a solution.
I love that.
So like data visualization, there's a lot of stuff too when it comes to nuance. So when there's a lot of like workplace training stuff where you replicate real world experiences and you can really understand the nuance of placement of items and how people engage and interact with each other. So training, again, type of thing, that's something that also benefits from VR.
That's really helpful. That's really helpful because now people can start thinking through when there is complexity, things that are multi-layer, things that require spatial. That's a great starting point to start looking. Or they can just call you and find out.
And I would be happy to provide you with really good VR solutions and not just saying everything needs VR, but finding those really important use cases that can really add value, or that VR can really add value to. So that's what focus on. But I would love for people to think of it more as a tool in a toolbox. Like there are many different ways that we can solve these problems that we experience. VR is one of many tools, but it is an extremely effective tool when used in the right situation. And I really do think that in the future we will see this, the value and the efficacy of VR when it is really utilized properly.
Oh, that is a perfect segue to our last question. And this one is a fun question I like to pose, which is, if you had a crystal ball, where do you think VR for work will be in the next 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think in the next 2 years, we're going to see VR in really sort of behind the scenes, critical infrastructure stuff. Things like energy, utilities, a lot of like heavy industry manufacturing, things that maybe are not immediately apparent to a lot of people who are not working within those industries. Telecom's another great example. I think that's really going to start to see widespread adoption within the next 2 years. Within the next 5 years, I really do think that every company is going to have its own corporate metaverse with full like telepresence and, you know, the ability to see each other's body language, the ability to collaborate together within one sort of immersive space and to do all of that within a specific company. And I think that when you're looking at the 10 year, it's going to be a lot like the internet was, where you had your sort of company intranets where it was individualized to one specific location and everybody had one, but they didn't connect together. I think that for VR in the corporate metaverse, it will eventually go towards like the global internet went with being truly global, where you have one sort of metaverse that everybody sort of connects to in the same way that we connect to the cloud and every company connects to the cloud. And it just sort of becomes an engaged, ubiquitous sort of thing that people take, instead of saying, oh, virtual reality or that's virtual reality or augmented reality, all just becomes this thing, this whatever word we end up using for it, that's just understood to exist everywhere. And for all intents and purposes, people feel like it's always existed in the same way that we feel like the internet's always existed. So I think that's a little bit down the line. That's a decade. But I think that we're taking small steps to get there. And the same way, like, you know, like the internet was, it first started in sort of government and really behind the scenes, big industries. And then it sort of went to enterprises and corporations, and then I went to private homes. So it takes a long time, and I think the biggest mistake that a lot of people have made with VR specifically is thinking that it would go the way of like cellular technology, that it would just immediately come out and sort of be a consumer thing. I've always seen it more like the internet or like the computer, where it takes a longer trajectory, but it has a much larger impact on society. It has a much larger impact on the business sector, all sectors, essentially, all human life. So, you know, I think that with the cellular phone, there was an inherent value. It was a phone. So everybody understood immediately what to do with it.
The personal impact,
Exactly. But with VR, it's a little bit, people are sort of struggling sometimes to understand what value it can add. And I really do think that there's a lot of really cool use cases, really impactful use cases, but it's just taking a while for people to really understand that and really embrace that. But when they do, these amazing transformative results have occurred, and I think that really speaks to the ultimate transformative power that VR will have on our world. So
I love it. And if the results that you shared today are any indication, it may come sooner rather than later. And I, you know, with every story that I hear about the true impact, I'm just like the sense of urgency to share with as many businesses as possible really surfaces, because it's a matter of overcoming the fear of the unknown, and I love your philosophy of focusing on the business impact and focusing on the problems to be solved and do it in a responsible way, and you know, connecting, building relationships with trusted partners. And we're not alone in this journey, and that's the beauty of partners like yourself, and you know, the work that we're bringing into the market. Oh, thank you so much for sharing your insights and also your vision for what VR is going to be in the future. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
But unfortunately, time goes fast, and this is all the time we have, folks. So I want to thank you, Susie, for sharing such amazing insights about the impact and the problems you're helping businesses solve today and into the future. And thank you to everyone who's taken the time to listen in. I hope that we've left you feeling inspired and also curious and with a sense of urgency. If you want to know more about VR for work, just head over to our website, forwork.meta.com, where you can check out a range of MetaQuest VR headsets, learn about VR solutions, or easily call one of our experts. But if you want to learn more about BadVR, which I highly recommend, just head to badvr.com. And that's all from us. See you next time.